welcome, Heather. I'm delighted that you're joining us and you're helping us in so many ways. Uh, I'll turn the stage over to you and we'll talk and we'll talk at the end. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Jeff, for creating this space for all of us to come together and talk. And thank you, Will, for that meditation right before jumping in to talk with everybody. I really needed it, actually, because this morning, I think Will and I were actually talking recently offline about how we are all doing life together. And not only are we doing it together, but we're doing it all together all the time. And so this morning, my daughter came in. I heard little footsteps come into our room, and I look at my clock, and it's 3:03 in the morning. So get up, take her to bed. She's out like a light 3 seconds later, and I'm up for the rest of the evening. I'm thinking about my head is swirling. I'm thinking about like how to navigate all this financing for our business. How is this pandemic affecting my daughter's psychology? I'm wondering, do we have any chocolate hidden anywhere in the house? Because I'm so tired of eating super duper healthy. And then I started wondering, if we all went out on our fire escape for a picnic to get some fresh air, could it hold all three of us at the same time? And I just had to stop. I stopped. I went into the living room and I started sketching. I started drawing because I found during this time that is what is really starting. I'm going to share my screen with you. That is what really is keeping me feeling calm right now. And so I started drawing. I put pen to paper and I just started watching the line come as I drew and watching that pattern. And suddenly my thoughts started to slip away. I started to connect with my body, as Will has been teaching us, focusing on the breath and just being able to sit there with my thoughts. And I found that I was actually able to ask myself a question and hear the answer. And suddenly it felt like I had some clarity. And the question that so Vern mentioned this morning that when we are able to focus on one single thing, and he actually mentioned creating visuals, it actually helps us to calm the mind. And that's exactly what I found this morning, and wanted to share that with you. There's a exercise that is in my book, Draw Your Big Idea, that is entitled What Keeps You Up at Night. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who's having this kind of concern right now. But it really asks, are you able, the question I asked myself was, am I able to solve this right now? And the answer was no, I'm not going to go out on my fire escape and see, how much weight it holds. But if the answer was yes, then I would be able to make a list of all of the issues that I felt like I was having and then start to put action behind it. And that allows me to go back to sleep. So it's that combination of using the drawing as a centering tool, centering activity that we can use for ourselves to help us as leaders to answer some of these really tough questions that keep us up at night. So I really do believe that creativity unlocks our brain's greatest potential. And it's the thing that allows us, or at least allows me and many people, to make that pivot and the change that we've been talking about. It's clearing the mind, even with simple doodling. So one of the things that I came up with when I was sitting there, and one of the evenings in the past couple of weeks was, how do we connect? And how can I create in a way that I'm able to serve others in this time? So that's what I want to talk about today. And to give a little bit of information about me and who I am, I'm Heather Willems. I am an author and a speaker and a visual strategist. And what I love to do is bring clarity through creativity to organizations in design sessions, 1-day facilitated strategy sessions, or even 3-day retreats and workshops. And another thing that I do is I do that through creating visuals. So I help people, I train trainers, I've trained trainers at Google. I've worked with different facilitators in the pharmaceutical industry. Um, uh, use creativity as a tool to create trust within teams. So here's an image of people having an elephant in the room conversation where they're talking to leadership about some of the issues that have been underlying for, in this case, over a decade, that they were bringing up to the surface, so they were able to start to solve for them. And then also communication, using visuals as a way to, and drawing as a way to communicate really complex ideas in a way that is clear and infinitely shareable. So I mentioned that I wrote a book. It's called Draw Your Big Idea. Over the past 15 years, I've traveled around the world working with leadership teams of the Fortune 500 companies, doing strategy work and marketing work. And so we looked at that and took all of the exercises that where we were bringing creativity into these strategy sessions, and we packaged it as a book that was really for the intrapreneur, the entrepreneur, and folks who are launching their ideas. And I feel like this book is very relevant right now as we are all starting to look to pivot and make some change in in our businesses and our lives. And so creativity is a tool that I think can bring us there. So in the next couple minutes, we're going to talk a little bit about connecting through isolation, how to create with your teams in a collaborative way in this virtual space, and then how we can continue to serve our community in the way that I know that we all want to, within this community here. I don't know if you can see my video at the same time or not, but I will just keep going. Okay, so connecting through isolation. This has been a big topic, as we all know, and throughout this call. And there we go. And thanks. And drawing has been a way that so many people have been doing that. I mentioned that I'm doing it in the middle of the night as a way to like find relaxation, to start to understand and process this pandemic that we're in and the changes that we want to create. But there's also so many people doing the same thing, and that are popping up on Instagram. And what I'm loving that I'm seeing is that people are taking their fears and their beliefs. Kim was talking about, examining your beliefs and thinking about, is it true and what is the opposite of it? And so I'm both creating and seeking out others who are finding the positive in this pandemic, and sharing it for all of us to learn from. So we talked earlier today when Vern was speaking is that visuals are a really strong way to connect. And actually 65% of us in our population are visual learners. So this is a great time to start bringing in visuals in a lot of different ways. We talked about bringing it as a video, as bringing it as, slides, different ways to communicate, and very much so using imagery as a way to share information. 3M Corporation did a study several years ago, and it stated that we process information from images 60,000 times faster than reading text. 60,000 times faster. Incredible. So using those visuals to help us learn during this time and sharing information is vital. And we've seen it all over the news every night. And this image is really hit home in the way that it's able to start to create change through the imagery that we're seeing and the way that things are being communicated so quickly in this way. So, with that basis, how are we going to continue to create and engage with our teams in this virtual space? So we mentioned the visuals are a great way of bonding with one another, whether we're using our video and the Zoom, or we're really communicating what needs to be done through a recorded video, sharing it in different ways. And we really have been sharing in a visual way since the beginning of our ancestors. It's in our DNA to be communicating this way. It's like we take communicating with emojis and text messages, um, in emojis and text messages for granted. And it's crazy to think that somebody actually had to invent graphical communication as a way to communicate. At some early point in time, our ancestors picked up a tool, in this case, a piece of coal or charcoal, and they started to make a mark. And these nonsensical marks actually are what kept us alive and survived. So this is, I'm going to butcher the name, I'm sure, the Cage of La Pasiega. It's one of the oldest caves or it's one of the oldest artifacts that have been found in caves in Spain. And what I think is really interesting about this particular cave is that there was evidence. One, it was the deepest, darkest part of the cave, and then also there was evidence that there were children that had come into this space. And so why would there be children deep darkness of that cave? It's one, because they use the imagery to communicate information, but they use it as a way to educate about what to be aware of what we fear. But they also used it as a way to entertain. So imagine that there was a fire that was in this space flickering up against these images on the walls. They actually became animations. So they started to create this movement and this energy, and a moving picture that helped us communicate and educate, even for the young children. What I think is really interesting about that, thinking about this image right now, is about some of the fear that we're addressing and how we are approaching it, ourselves as leaders, how we're dealing with it, whether it's through meditation or working with a coach, drawing, writing, connecting with our community, or reaching out to our clients and the folks that we're serving. This is another exercise that I've used many, many times with clients, typically mapping out a journey. So how somebody might use a pharmaceutical, Tylenol or a product. But this can also be used when we're working with our teams to touch base with our employees and see how they are doing. What are they doing at different points during the day? How are they finding themselves emotionally? What is their experience working with their kids, or working at home and with their families? What are they thinking and feeling throughout the day? So it's important, again, to do that. And one way that I like to work with leaders, and I also work with teams, is to draw out their vision, and their ideal state. So moving from that space that we're listening to them, understanding what their fears are, but then also encouraging them to see the opportunity and dream of what the future could be. I think Tom mentioned earlier today that we're looking to see that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us. So what is that gift? So this is actually an exercise I recently did with my husband to talk about what is the greatest vision that we have for ourselves as a couple and as a family coming out of this situation where we're working so closely together. We did this when we were on a walk, and we went through all of these different categories of this vision mind map of imagining what that future state, that positive future state will be for us. Who will be there with us? Who are we going to have dinner with first? Are we going to continue to live here in our apartment in New York? Are we going to explore other areas? What's the impact that we want to have through our work? Um, and then, really diving into what that sensory experience is. If we're um, living in another place, like what is that surrounding area like? What's the color of the sky? Really starting to hone in on what that vision of the future is, putting it out there so it can become a reality for us. And so this is something I can encourage you to do for your teams or with your teams as well. And so when you're starting to lift up that energy and bring in that positivity of what that vision could be, sharing that within the team is also crucial too. Get on that Zoom call, get a cocktail, do a happy hour, and bring in that laughter when you're sharing what that future state's going to be for you, because bringing in laughter really is crucial for innovation. It starts to change the chemistry in our mind. It's kind of the secret sauce for making those neural connections in our brain. Um, there was a study that was done by McKinsey, I believe, and they found that when there was laughter within innovation groups, the productivity increased 30%. We just heard incredible productivity tools from Nicholas. But one thing I didn't hear him say was laughter. So how do we bring in that laughter into this space when we all really need it so dearly? um, so another way when I'm working with teams, either on site or now virtually, we're really doing several things. We're designing the event and designing the agenda to be very collaborative. Bringing in brainstorming sessions and iteration is key to really start to fine tune and move forward quickly with that idea that's going to help us to pivot. Vern mentioned having very clear visual metaphors. In scaling up, he talks about using them quarterly. Today, I heard him say using them twice a day, using those clear visual metaphors for what that one thing is that's important to get us through the day, and, and touching base with that. And then another thing that always comes out of our vision or our collaboration sessions is mapping the key ideas or the key actions visually. How we're going to actually make change and hold one another accountable is especially important when we're working virtually and can't see one another. So one way to do that is this was a training session that I was doing, teaching some of the graphic recording and visual note taking. But one way to keep all of those changes in the conversations that you're having documented is through this visual language. So not only is it documented in a way that you can take it forward and make the changes that are necessary, but it's also starting to capture a little bit more of the emotion that's in the room. It's pulling out those visual metaphors in people's conversations, and how the visual graphic recording works, which I've been doing behind the scenes, is I've been listening to the conversation, drawing up the big ideas, and then organizing them in a way that all of the content makes sense when you come back to visit it at a later date. And when you're combining words and pictures, you're actually increasing your memory retention, or the memory retention of the person who's creating the document, but also the people who are seeing the document be created and revisiting it later. It's increased by 65%. So these when it's captured in this way, not only is it engaging people in the moment when you're in these virtual calls, it's documenting the information that's being shared, and it's doing it in a way that's really engaging and exciting, and it's taking a way that you can turn these intangible concepts and put them into creation. So I wanted to give you all some exercises that you can actually start to use on your own, and then also with your teams. I've got a 30-day challenge here for everybody because I know we have time. I know we all have at least 5 minutes that we can do a day to learn something new. So why not pick up your drawing skills? So you will only ever need a mark making tool. I happen to have my daughter's crayon right here, but a marker. I also use an iPad. But you can make those marks with anything. So you can create anything with these 5 elements of drawing: a square, a triangle, a circle, and a squiggle. Combining those different shapes, dots, and lines, you can start to create any sort of imagery that you'd like to represent, because it's really about creating an idea and not about making a masterful art piece. So this will come out to you with this 30-day challenge, but it really is challenging you to every single day um, look at something in your space and try to draw it based on these 5 elements, and see where it leads you. And the key is to have fun with it. Do it every day and have fun with it. Another way to bring in the visual note taking into your sessions is using clear writing is very important when you're not typing and people's handwriting isn't always up to par or readable. So it's really starting to slow down. You can create those box letters, and then you can start to decorate some of your titles once you're able to build off of some of those box letters. When I say box letter, it's like use 1 letter per box to create that shape. And again, we'll make sure we get all of these to you. And then another way when you're doing the visual note taking is to highlight information using bullets. And those bullets can become action items as well. You can use shapes. Something as simple as a rectangle with a triangle in it all of a sudden needs to send something out in the mail. A circle with a squiggly inside of it is a fresh new idea. We've got our check mark and actually boxes that can be checked. So thinking creatively about how you use your bullets when you're taking visual notes, either on your own or with your teams. And then using the frames and connectors. So you saw that I was using some imagery in several of the drawings. Like, those images can actually be containers for information. So it gives the content a little bit more context. It can refer back to those visual metaphors that everybody's been using throughout the entire day, to add a little bit more of a story to what's being said. And then, of course, you can start to connect them with arrows and all sorts of different connectors. I do know that this was quite quick going through it, but I'm always happy to talk more about it and share the information later. And then wanted to talk a little bit about how we serve in our community, and how we serve can be, on many levels. We are serving within our own families and our homes. We're serving our teams in the virtual space. And then we're serving our clients. And then also, like, what can we do for our community? How can we create a positive impact when we're out, from our homes here? And so one way that we do that is by getting in touch with our values and our purpose. So this is something I've been working on with many clients over the years is helping them to put a story to their values. One, try to hone in on what their personal values and their professional values are, linking it to what the impact is that they want to have, and then keeping that really fresh and alive within the culture. So again, Nicholas talked about how sometimes when you move over virtually, the culture can be lost, where it's a struggle to create new habits within the culture. Keeping your values and what your overarching goal is visible, and having that start off every meeting is a great way to keep people connected in this space. So, it's also a way when your employees are able to see it, and you're starting every meeting off with that. Your employees also have a greater understanding and a way to articulate what that BHAG is, who the core customers are, brand promise, and part of that elevator pitch to keep everybody aligned and focused on what really matters and when you're serving. So I've worked with clients on this. Hoka is one of my clients that I love working with. They're a great performance running shoe. I think we're all running a little bit more to get some exercise. So if you have an opportunity to pick up some Hokas, they're very they're designed for runners who are injured, so they're a great running shoe. Anyway, they were scaling rapidly, and they felt that they needed to reconnect and rearticulate what their goals or what their vision and their values and their purpose were. So I came in and I helped them to design a 3-day session where we really got them, all of the employees, drawing up what those ideas were, communicating and collaborating, doing switching teams and iterating on the solutions that they were coming up with. And one of the projects that they worked on was a philanthropic project. Like, what would Hoka be in the future in their philanthropic processes? And so they all came up with ideas and reported them out. And they're taking those forward. Or they were, at least before we kind of had a pause here. They also used at the end of the session, I visualized the results of their work. So captured the shared vision that they captured their mission, their purpose, and tied it to the stories that they had been discussing throughout the entire 3-day session. They also used those images virtually and digitally in their conference, and they also shared it with their team globally. After the event, we ended up making an animated video, which they then used for onboarding. That all of that information came out of one 3-day strategy session, and they've been using this content for about 18 months now to help them keep them aligned. Another way to help to serve our clients and to keep us connected as our teams is to use visuals as a way to keep us focused on that one thing, as Vern mentioned this morning. Visualizing our goals, but also mapping out what are those big rocks that are going to get us to our number one thing. What are those key action items that we need to do every day that what Kim mentioned this morning, when we're taking those action steps that are aligned with something bigger, we don't have time to be in a place of fear. So I work with clients to do that as well, to start to visualize what their action items are to keep people on track and keep them aligned and accountable in their. So it's another exercise, a visual template that can be used that's out of the book, and it's thinking about where we are in the current state and then putting yourself in that future state, putting ourselves in the future state and the results that we want to achieve. So once you're able to put yourself into that future state, that vision of the future, able to really visualize it, I guide teams to look back in time towards the present. What were some of those obstacles, those really big obstacles that we're looking at right now? Like how did we overcome them? Thinking of them from the future state. What was the path that we took to overcome some of those challenges and those issues that were coming up in the past? So starting to use this visual template as a way to map out what some of those solutions are. Another thing that I love about using the visual metaphors as a tool when I'm working with teams is it really starts to help people to think differently. So we're not, when we're working with spreadsheets and we're working maybe heads down by ourselves in our offices, a tendency is to write everything down and think very linearly. When you start drawing up ideas and you start collaborating with your teams in a visual way, it changes the way that you approach the problem. You start to see the problem from a different perspective. New ideas start to open up, and the solutions I've found become much more robust in the workplace. And so these templates can also be used in the virtual space as well. Murals is a tool that I use a lot of the times. We can import some of these templates and then start to use sticky notes as a team and start to co-create this information together live in real time. Another way to keep us on track to make sure that we're serving our community is through the accountability. Keeping ourselves accountable, taking those, once we've set that vision of the future, once we've identified what those rocks are that we need to accomplish, actually putting them into action steps, setting smart goals for one another, or setting smart goals and then holding one another accountable to it. I've been part of many through EO. I've been part of Mastermind for about 6 years, and then also have done led several accountability teams over the years, and setting those quarterly goals, the monthly goals, and then even the weekly goals becomes very helpful in touching base with peers and other people that you're working with to help you to celebrate some of those wins. And right now, especially, I have an accountability partner that I work with, and we're touching base every single day around the top 3 goals that we have that we want to accomplish to get ourselves moving and through this pivot point. And so again, here's another template that you can use, a visual template that can really start to help folks to think differently and how they are looking at getting through this tough time. So again, setting that big goal, looking at the future of what that future state is going to be, and then walking backwards through time back to the present, and imagining like what were those milestones that we needed to overcome. I use this when I'm coaching in the accelerator program. We set our milestones every month that we need to hit. What's that thing that you need to do in order to move forward? And then I think at this time, what is also very important to do is to think about where our resources are. Jeff said earlier this morning, sometimes finding a solution isn't about what you need to do, but it's a question of who. So sometimes your resources, mapping out your resources per milestone of like who's able to help you through this. What tools are available to us digitally in this virtual space? Who are some unexpected folks that we could call upon and reach out to at this point that might be able to move us forward, um, move us forward at this time. And then another thing that's very important to remember when we're going through obstacles and when we're going through some of these milestones and these tough times is to really call upon strengths that we have within ourselves and within our teams. We've heard personal strengths, or how to keep ourselves strong. In the coaches chat, we're talking about eating healthy, getting exercise, having a spiritual practice, finding a community that supports you, um, having a family that comes in when you're having a conversation. But what brings you joy? What is that strength? What's energizing you so you can be strong for your team? And then also, where are your strengths in your team? Where are they able to help out and stand up? Who has the knowledge and experience that you don't have? And like really finding ways to rely on them at this time is so important. And then, of course, I like to started out with Pira in the conversation. How she woke me up this morning, just kind of came in the door here. But I use the accountability trackers that I use for teams at home as well. So it really is this, we really are all in this together, and we're all working together. And the family, business, and personal is really starting to overlap in a really interesting and beautiful way. And I think creativity is key to keeping it fresh, keeping it exciting, and making sure that we all stay on track and aligned at this time. So that kind of brings me to the end of some of the things that I formally wanted to share, but we talked about ways that we can connect with ourselves. We can use drawing as a way to connect with ourselves when we're trying to quiet our mind, calm down, center, and get some clarity, to start to draw out some of those ideas and see where those ideas start to overlap and inform one another. We talked about how we can create with our team, how we can connect with them, listen to what they have to say, find out what their vision and their goals are at this time, and or even what's keeping them up at night, and then developing new habits and tools. Using drawing as a way to start communicating in a different way with our teams, to allow us to engage, to align around common ideas, and really to let those ideas build one upon another. And then, of course, how do we bring all of this together to serve our families, to serve our teams, and to serve our community? And doing that, I think what's key there is what we talked about was really being aligned with our values, having a clear idea of our inner purpose, and how we want to create an impact in this space where we're able to pivot and create. um, and um, and my daughter's just joined us here. So how do we continue to serve